So speaking of that, I have a slide of a couple of local accomplishments that have happened with some Greens in the past. And this is, of course, not everything, but, trying our best to throw some stuff in a short presentation. But for example, Jason West was a former Green mayor in New York who was the first to officiate same-sex marriages. So when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and all those folks were saying that, no, marriage is a man and a woman and we don't support same-sex marriage and all, Greens were making it happen. Gail McLaughlin. Huh?
Illegally.
Yeah, right. Civil disobedience.
Right. It wasn't legal in New York, and he was officiating gay marriages as a someone who could legally officiate marriages anyway.
Right.
And laying the groundwork for future lawsuits to change things.
Yeah, exactly. Push for things to change. So we have Gail McLaughlin, who was a former Green mayor in California, who implemented some police reforms. And what I thought was most interesting was in the 2008 housing crisis, they used eminent domain to instead of like taking as they do in Pennsylvania, taking property and giving it to like oil companies or pipelines or whatever. They took it and they made sure that there was public affordable housing for folks, so that to deal with the housing crisis, to deal with homelessness, and so that's an action that could be taken at the local levels a lot more, and we don't see. But that was something a Green did. We have the Reverend Pinky, who ran for or was a Green community organizer in Michigan, that they actually ended up sending to jail. But he exposed all this tax evasion and corruption all in the local government there, where like the Whirlpool company had basically paid off like everybody that worked for the city government. So that was a Green action that they did that was important. We have Sherry Honkala, who was actually the Green vice presidential candidate in 2012, who is a big activist in Philadelphia for homeless advocacy. And she actually funded the Poor People's Human Economic Rights campaign, which does all kinds of trainings right now about how to help homeless people, find places to live and to take care of them.
Yeah, they are still running full speed. They're taking over houses.
Yeah.
And putting homeless folks into them and protecting the houses, and they have a model for something that could be done in every city across the country.
Yeah, and one thing I liked, she also tried to run for state representative at one point, and one of her campaign promises was if she got elected and had the office in Harrisburg, our state capital, that she would house people in her office in the state capital until they did something about it. And I think that message resonated with people, and that was partly why the Democrats in her local place tried to lie that they said she wasn't even running for office and that people had to vote Democrat and things like that. They were, and some of those folks actually went to jail in Philadelphia. There were local Democrats who were lying about Greens not being on the ballot and all, and they actually faced criminal charges, went to jail over that. So this is another thing that we have to fight as Greens, another level of corruption. But we do it, and every time that happens, we get our message out more.
And you're seeing it right now with Matthew Ho in North Carolina, where the State Board of Elections threw him off the ballot when his lawyer asked if any of their petitions that were turned in were actually questionable or challenged. They shut the lawyer's camera off and then voted to kick him off the ballot down party lines, right? They were sending people to people's houses to try to get them to remove their names from the petition that was going to put him on the ballot. They did the exact same thing in 2020 in Montana. It's why Howie wasn't on the ballot in Montana, because the Democrats actually harassed people into removing their name from the petitions and got us one petition lower than we needed in one district in the state, and we were thrown off the ballot. After the election, that whole law that said we had to collect per district got thrown out. So we should have been on the ballot in 2020 in Montana. In 2016, there were charges filed, and I don't know if people went to jail or if they fled the state. But in Nevada, people provided fraudulent signatures to the Green Party. And it wasn't just like a bad signature. They committed fraud and had charges filed against them. So when people say, why don't Greens win? There's a lot of reasons, and illegal activity by the Democratic Party is a pretty major one.
Yeah.
and then collusion on keeping us off the ballot, right? For me to run for U.S. House as a Republican or Democrat in my district in a normal year, it takes about 750 signatures from within my congressional district. To run as a Green, it takes 16,000. 22 times more signatures in 90 days from a single congressional district, right? So they haven't made it illegal for Greens to get on the ballot in Illinois, but they've made it pretty difficult to actually accomplish the feat, to the point that I don't think most Democratic candidates could accomplish it.
Yeah, you would need a lot of money and volunteers essentially to pull that off.
We did it in 2016. 53,000 signatures collected in 90 days, and we killed ourselves doing it. Yeah. I collected over 1,000 on my own, and it was exhausting.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of work. But that's where volunteers and all are important, because the more volunteers, then the more we can spread out the work. And even though sometimes it can get discouraging with what Democrats do to us, the answer is always to organize more and to get more volunteers and to have more people power, and we can overcome it. So, but we'll still talk about when it's unfair. So, and then the last thing on the list here is I appreciated Jill Stein, that aside from running for presidential candidate, that actually opened up the ability to do a lawsuit in Pennsylvania, where folks don't realize that in Pennsylvania before the 2020 election, so very recently, we had these electronic voting machines that when you went and voted, you pressed the button for who you voted, and it would just say thanks, and then that's it. Like, you had no verification that it actually voted for the person that you think it does. And even the election workers themselves had no idea what the actual counts were. At the end of the night, the machine just spits out a piece of paper that says, here's the counts. And so, these were highly contested and not even sure if the software was doing it correctly, and not even necessarily for malicious reasons, but just software has bugs, right? Like, so is this thing even doing what it's supposed to? And Jill Stein's lawsuit ended up, it was fought in court for several years by the Democratic Party again, the Democratic governor. But eventually they gave in to a settlement that moved us to paper ballots that could be audited. So in 2020, for the first time, we voted on paper ballots that you could see exactly who you voted for. It goes into a box, and then they can recount them by hand if they need to, so they're auditable. And that's what we need. And maybe to some degree, Trump's lawsuits to try to overthrow the election failed in Pennsylvania, in part because Jill Stein made paper ballots happen. It wasn't the Democratic Party. They were fine having that old system. They fought it for a long time, but it was Greens that made that important change. So, don't let them ever tell you that you can't do stuff, because you can do stuff without being in office. And if you do get in office, even if it's just the local levels, a lot can be done at local levels to change what your community looks like.